Welcome to Syntax. Today, we're going to be talking about Wes's new website. He moved it from Gatsby to React Server Components. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned here, and I'm excited to get into it, learn a little bit about your experience, and just general get the vibes for what the type of rewrite like this actually costs. My name is Scott Talinsky. I'm a developer from Denver. With me, as always, is Wes Boss. What's up, Wes?
Hey, I'm super stoked to actually have this out the door. So one of those projects I've been poking around at for quite a while. You know, those projects where it's like not super pressing, but every now and then I dip into it. And finally I was like, I got to actually finish this thing. Let me get this thing out the door. So I learned a lot about moving it from Gatsby. I'll talk about why I moved it and whatnot in just a sec, but learned quite a bit as well. We're going to talk about how to migrate over as well as hosting it. I put it on Cloudflare, how much that costs, all that good stuff.
Nice. Sick. I just got back from Barcelona at the Svelte Summit, Wes. Yeah.
How was that?
Man, cool conference. They had it in this like really kind of old, rustic kind of building. You said it looked kind of like a prison, but it was really cool. The whole thing was just like felt like very specific vibes to it. And all the talks were great. You know, there's something really special about a smaller conference where all of the talks are about like one common thread. Like you really feel like you can get something out of all of the talks. And there were like several speakers who it was their first time speaking, and they like you would have never known. They were just like every single person was dialed. Everybody was there for the same reasons. It was great.
What was your talk on?
My talk was on local first with Zero, basically talking about how local first as a concept is like it's fairly rigid in terms of what local first is defined as, but like not every site can practically use all of those things. So maybe more like local first ish and how that pertains to something like Zero. Even like the guy who created Zero tweeted out, it's like Zero is not local first. And like that's pretty much what my talk was about. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Also, I got to say there's a really funny moment. Just to, forgive me for telling this story really quick. After I spoke, Wes, I was wearing my Syntax Big Perp tee. I'm wearing jeans and a hat, and I went to go out to eat, and I was just like, all right, I'll go out to eat, and I found this place. You know, I looked at so first and foremost, I looked at the menu, and the prices did not look bad, and maybe it was the lunch menu because I walked in and I talked to the guy, and I asked for a table for one. He says there's no tables, and then he goes off to talk to another guy, and they're far enough away that I cannot hear what they're saying, right? And then they come back, and he's like, we have a table. And then as they're walking me back into the dining area, which I could not see from the entrance, I have this terrible feeling in my stomach because every single man in this restaurant was wearing a full suit. And all of the women were wearing like fancy dresses, and I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt and a hat,
like a mineral wash purple t-shirt.
And they're walking me back to this table, and I kid you not, this table could not have been more hidden. They hid me. There was these two massive plants to the one side of the table, and then nothing in front of me. A window to the right of me. So like if you were walking into the store, you might be able to just see my back. But from any other vantage point in the restaurant, you're just seeing plants. They hid me in this restaurant.
That's hilarious.
They didn't want me to be seen, which I don't blame them. It was I was just like feeling, oh wait, oh no, maybe I'll just get an appetizer and bounce.
Yeah, I don't belong here.
Yeah, totally. And if you want to see all of the errors in your application, you'll want to check out Sentry at sentry.io/syntax. You don't want a production application out there that, well, you have no visibility into in case something is blowing up and you might not even know it. So head on over to sentry.io/syntax. Again, we've been using this tool for a long time and it totally rules. All right. Let's get into actual real stuff.
Yes, let's get into it. So my personal website, this is not my like course platform or anything. This is just my personal website that houses several things. It has my blog on it, has all of my like hot tip screenshots and videos, and it has all of my notes for my JavaScript content, as well as just like pages and whatnot about speaking and about me, etc. So that website I built I don't know, probably 6 years ago, right when Gatsby was starting to have its sort of come up. And I built the whole thing in MDX on Gatsby, and I was really happy with it for many years. However, it grew to a point where it was getting very slow to deploy it because when I built it, Gatsby was simply just a static site generator, and that included all of the actual images. And it grew to a point where I have, I don't know, probably, I think there's about 600 pages on my website, and I think there's 4,000 images or something like that. And it was taking like up to 25, 30 minutes to build the website without any like caching. And that was including like trying to process the images on like Google Cloud Compute and doing them in parallel. And I got to a point where I was just like, I'm not putting anything on my website anymore because I don't want to fuss with it, you know, and that's not a good spot to be. So I was like, I gotta get somewhere where adding content to my website is fast and easy to a point where I want to do it. So I decided, all right, let's move it off. And my goals for moving this off is I don't want to change the design. I'm even though it's a relatively old design, I'm very happy with it. I don't want to change the functionality because that's a can of worms. When you start migrating something, if you also want to change like what it looks like and how it functions, then it becomes too big of a project. So I thought I can do that after, but let's just get this thing moved over one-to-one to a different framework. And then most importantly, I wanted to improve both the build time as well as the page speed score, the perf on that. There was some low-hanging fruit that I could do to do that. So I decided that the new stack, I wanted to stay on React because even though it was built on Gatsby, like 90% of the website was simply just like templating out and logic and whatnot, and Node.js logic at build time, React logic on, I guess it wasn't really on the server, right? It was just pre-rendered HTML and then on the client. So I wanted to stay on React so that I could just simply move over all of my existing components. I was kind of tempted to redo it in Nuxt after talking to Daniel, but I was like, that's too big of a job. I'm going to stay on React, and I want to stay on MDX as well because I had written like I said, about 500 JavaScript notes and blog posts that were all written in MDX, and I was not interested in moving that to a different CMS or anything like that. Plus, like my beginner JavaScript course, I had it entirely. I paid a technical writer to basically take it and build text notes, and it's a huge resource for it, right? And I love having that on GitHub because I've probably had 300-400 pull requests for clarifications on the content, little typo fixes, things here and there. And I don't think that I would be able to do 400 fixes to this content by myself. So I very much wanted to keep that on GitHub. So what I did is I said, okay, I want to build this thing in React Server components. It's starting to get more popular. I really want to understand how it works. So I moved the entire thing to Next.js, and I was not super happy with it. And I'll tell you why. And this is not really a slam on Next.js. It was just
roast it, Wes.
My personal project of I want to keep this thing similar to how I had it in Gatsby. It just didn't really fit into the holes that were Next.js. So I had problems with TurboPack and all the MDX plugins that I have. So I had to keep going back and forth between turning TurboPack on and turning it off. Next.js is still entirely common JS. So there was like a bunch of like weird edge cases where I couldn't import packages and I was pull requesting them. And it was just like weird annoyances where I just spent days on these like little paper cuts, and then I opened issues on the Next.js. A lot of them were fixed over time, but I kind of got frustrated with that. Dynamic imports were a bit of a pain. So the weird thing about these websites, and this is not a Next.js thing, but if you want to dynamically import some content, meaning that like you go to a blog post and then you click on like a post, you have like a slug in your URL, and then it needs to look up the blog post by that slug and then find it, right? So I needed dynamic imports for that so that I could, when somebody visits this URL, you find the blog post and then you import that MDX file as if it were like a JavaScript file, right? It goes through the whole ESM ecosystem. And that dynamic import was really, really funky. And I was using some weird Webpack stuff, and that didn't translate over well to TurboPack. So I was like, you know what? I got it working. And then I wanted to deploy it to Cloudflare. And Cloudflare is working on this thing called Open NextJS, where essentially what they do is they take the NextJS build and like the compressed Webpack outputs and all of these like Webpack bundles, and then they basically are just like monkey patching it to make it work on Cloudflare. And at the time, it was kind of just ramping up and it wasn't mature enough. I logged like 6 or 7 issues, and I spent a lot of time in the Discord talking to the devs with it. But I was just like, I'm maybe like 6 months too early on this. I think it would be a bit better. But between that and the build times on Cloudflare, I was getting like 10, 11 minute build times on Cloudflare. I would hit this very frustrating issue where I hit this with Cloudflare in general, is like something works locally because you just run it in Node.js, and then you deploy it and the Cloudflare runtime is slightly different, you know? And you get this like annoying feedback loop where you have to like build it, deploy it, wait for, or like deploy it, build it, wait for it to deploy. And you can run Cloudflare locally, but the way that this and what I ended up using works is that you have to first build it and then run it through Cloudflare, whether that's on Cloudflare's infrastructure or whether that's locally through their Wrangler tool. So I was like, oh, that's kind of annoying as well. You know, like it's not just like a quick feedback loop. It was very, very slow. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try something else. I had moved everything to that point to React Server Components. And the beautiful thing about React Server Components is that it's not a Next.js thing. I had used very few Next.js APIs in actually building out the website. So I was like, I can move this thing anywhere. It's just Node.js and React Server Component code. So I took a look at what the options were. I look at TanStack Start. They don't have their React Server Component story just yet, and I didn't feel like moving it off of Server Components again. So I ended up landing on Waku, which is a Vite-based Waku. I always say it wrong. Waku.
I know.
It's a Vite-based React Server Component framework. It's very similar to Next.js, but it has a bit more. It's way more peeled back. There's a lot more like rougher edges. A lot of stuff is undocumented, but because it's a pre 1.0, I was okay with that because I'm able to read the code, and I was in the Discord all the time chatting with the devs behind it who are fantastic. So I moved it over to Waku, and I've been really happy with it. It's really easy to. The reason why I was on React Server Components with this type of thing is that it's very easy to either pre-generate your components at build time or do asynchronous components on the server before they actually ship out to the client. So I didn't have to build them all at build time if I didn't want to. You could just await like a database call or something right before you go and render out the page. All right, so that's why I chose what is it? Waku?
Yeah, Waku.
What is when? Waku.
Yeah.
Waku. Okay. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to do a whole lot of functionality, but on my hot tips page where I embed all the little TikTok and short form videos that I do, I was like, I need to post these on my own website because people are always coming to me being like, hey, where's the video on X, Y, and Z? And I'm just like, I don't know. Or, hey, do you have a spot with all your videos? I'm like, they're kind of spread on all the social networks out there. I kind of need to own this content. So what I did is I built some integration with all of the different social networks to scrape the stats from each of them. And then I'm saving those stats like the hearts, the retweets, the comments, the views. I'm saving all of that stuff to Cloudflare D1, which is just a SQLite database using Drizzle. And I've been really happy with that setup because I essentially am just using the JSON schema from Drizzle, meaning that I figured out how to scrape Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and several others. And I'm just basically saving that data and throwing it in as a JSON object into Cloudflare D1, and then I can pull it out when it is that I need it, or I can rescrape it if it's past the sort of expiry time. Been pretty happy with that. The videos themselves, I did a little bit of sneaky work here as well. I was like, I don't really want to host the videos myself, because like that's a whole nother project of like having to host them myself. So I figured out, I like reverse engineered the like streaming protocol from one of these. I won't say which one it is, but the streaming protocol from one of these social networks. And I'm just using them to stream the M3U8 file into MediaChrome, which is the video player from Mux. And it's been working really well for me as well.
Man.
Yeah. It was kind of a fun one as well, because I was always just like, I need to have all this content on my own. And like, of course, none of these social networks want you being able to access this data, except for Blue Sky. Blue Sky is the only one that uses a proper API to get this data. The rest of them are simply just scraped or using some sort of thing to go around it.
Huh.
The blog itself is MDX, like I said. The images, that's another problem I had with Next.js, is that the image sourcing was always a little bit tricky, because they wanted you to put the images in like an images folder. And the way that I write my blog posts is I want to put the images kind of side by side with the MDX content, meaning that a blog post can just be a folder, and I can throw anything I want in that folder, right? I can throw assets, I could throw images, I could throw, and then of course, MDX text and any other components that I want to embed right inside of it. So moving it from Gatsby. So the way that Gatsby works is that there's like a whole like sourcing engine, and you create what are called nodes. And then those nodes are then surfaced via a GraphQL API. I ended up simply just writing functions that dynamically require the MDX files, and that replaced all of that work. I did have to write, like, for example, like for pagination and being able to figure out what the next piece of content is. So basically on startup, it sources every single piece of content from the MDX files and just does a require. And I have this massive, like basically not almost an import map. And then from that, I can figure out if I want like 10, I want page 2, I can just take items 11 to 20. And then when I'm on a piece of content, if I want to be able to link to the next piece of content, then I'm able to basically look at that massive array of content and then say, well, this is the current one. Now give me the index that is the next one and the previous one. So there's a lot of like tricky stuff with MDX, because there's no database, right? So it's not like you can simply just like query 2 items, or you can use like a cursor and say like, give me these items and then the next 2 and then the previous 2, because there's no database. And even then, like if you look at all these like React.js tutorials of like build a blog, they're almost never showing like a listing of all the blog posts, because there's no like API to just query all the blog posts, unless you were to write a whole bunch of like wildcard matching, which is what I had ended up doing. Page speed. I'm pretty happy with the page speed. I got a 100 on desktop and a 96 on mobile. I had it up to like a 97 or 98, but you know how these things work. If you do it on the wrong day or the wind is blowing in a certain way, then it goes up and down. But several things I did to make the page speed much better is the old navigation did not look like this. The old navigation was, there were 2 rows, where the first row was a bunch of links, and then the second, whatever wrapped onto the second row, I would apply a class to make it slightly smaller, so that the top ones were nice and big, and then anything that spilled onto the second row was much smaller. And in order to do that, with CSS, you can't target things that are in a specific row. So what I was doing is I had a resize observer on the nav, and then I would check the X and Y coordinates of each of the links, and I would figure out when something was knocked down into a secondary row. And that was causing like a bunch of page jank, because what happened is that the page would load, the CSS would apply, then the JavaScript would trigger that change of the nav, and then it would figure out and apply classes, and it would make the items smaller. And it would do that every time it loaded, right? And that was kind of disorienting to the user. Not a huge deal because it only happens once, but it was also just killing me on page speed, because I was getting a largest contentful paint like 200 or like 2000 milliseconds into the page load, which is way too late, and it was absolutely killing me. So I ended up scrapping that nav, even though like I posted on Twitter, everyone's like, I like the old nav better, but I ended up just doing a very simple navigation like this, and I've been pretty happy with that. I wrote a bunch of MDX plugins myself, which is such a wild world. It's all like DOM tree traversal, or not DOM, like not even DOM tree, AST trees.
Yeah.
And basically, your markdown gets exploded into this AST tree that is all infinitely nested, and you have to write these like walkers that go through
and transform
basically,
it.
I wrote a walker looking for images, and then when you hit an image, I would read that image and figure out what the width and the height of that image were, and then I would inline the width and the height and the aspect ratio of each of the images, so that when you visit one of the pages, like the about page, in the split second here, if anyone was watching a video, you see the split second while this image is loading, it's not pushing the content down below it because there is a width and a height explicitly set on it, as well as a whole bunch of like source set. So all the different sizes of the images, which are generated with the Cloudflare images.
Yeah. So you're telling me you put a walker in your Waku?
A walker in my Waku, yes. So
yes.
I freaking hate writing. I'm not cut out for writing MDX plugins, and I probably wrote about 4 of them for this project.
Let me tell you, I wrote a custom demo one for mine, where I have like HTML demos, and then by inserting like a line of like a special markdown string, what it's doing is it's loading and iframing in those demos, and like that was enough for me. I mean, it was like, oh, this is so painful.
So painful. So doing that with the images really upped the page speed as well, because Gatsby did that for you. But that's not something, and that's built into NextJS, but it's not something that's built into Waku. You have to kind of do it yourself, especially when the images are not part of like a JSX file or TSX file. It's part of an MDX file. So you have to make sure that all of the images in your MDX files are actually explicitly exported or imported from each of those files. So I had to write a whole bunch of code for that as well.
Yeah.
Hosting. I put this thing on Cloudflare. I previously was on Netlify, a big fan of that. I have quite a few of my projects on Vercel. I've got quite a bit of stuff on Cloudflare, but I have a couple. I don't have a big site on Cloudflare Workers. It's lots of like demos and tiny little websites and whatnot. And I wanted something that had like serious traffic and used a lot of the products, so that we can confidently talk about how it works, limitations, pricing, all of that stuff. So this thing, like Waku, builds wicked fast. Like it's like a minute and a half or 2 minutes to build and deploy this things, and that's just the best. Yeah.
Why does it make what makes it building it fast? Is it that it's on Vite, or is it on Vite?
It's because it's Vite. Yeah. It's partially because it's on Vite, and partially because it's not doing everything at build time. So my Gatsby website would generate a static page for, I don't know, there's probably a couple thousand pages, right? And then it would do it for all of the images. So now the images get generated on demand via the URL Cloudflare. So that was quite a bit. And then not every single page gets pre-generated on build time, because I can simply just do that on request and then cache the actual output of it. So there's several of them that I do statically generate at build time, like the homepage and whatnot, just so that that's always nice and fast. But the rest of them are, you simply just wait until somebody needs to go to that page, then it generates, and then it will try to serve up like a cache version of it first, and then kick off a revalidation in the background. But if not, then they wait around for a couple hundred milliseconds for it to regenerate that page.
Nice.
So yeah, the builds I'm so happy about how fast the builds were on Cloudflare, just because it's with Vite. That was always such a pain for me. It's just waiting for it to deploy, especially when like there's like a silly, you send an email out to a couple 100,000 people and then there's a typo on it and you're getting emails. Hey, this is spelled wrong, like every 5 seconds. Like, no, stop. I know, I'm waiting for it to build.
Welcome to the year 2020, Wes.
Which
that you've moved to Vite, that you've now entered the year 2020, where
I've been using Vite for like 8 years. I have Vite on my entire course platform.
I'm talking about in this site.
Oh no, what?
I'm just goofing.
Okay, but like
I'm just goofing, man. I understand. I don't get it.
Okay, well, like I'll use whatever the things use, Mr. Talinsky. You don't even have a website.
I do have a website. It's not good though.
Yes, this is not very good.
It's fine. Hey, click on one of those blog posts. Click on one of them. Yeah, there we go. We got some page transitions. We got
nice
filtering. It's all very.
I should add page transitions to mine.
I even got a couple themes.
Yeah, but anyways, I'm very happy with how quick it is. I'm so happy with Vite, and it's funny because Vite is about to get so much faster as well. This is not even using any of the new Vite stuff, which I'm really excited for.
Yeah, totally.
The Open Graph images are using Cloudflare's Puppeteer browser built in, so it takes a screenshot and uses that. That worked really well.
That's such a clever implementation, Wes. I don't know if you are the person who came up with that, but you are the only person I've seen do that.
It's not perfect. It breaks from time to time because you're literally firing up a browser to take a screenshot and it has to take it fast enough. But you don't have to generate them like ahead of time or whatever. So I've been happy, and you get like full control over it. So let me see if I can find what is the URL. Oh yeah, so like here's an example of one page. This one doesn't have any images on it, but I'm able to use CSS for all of this, and then it's just generated on demand, and it does that via Cloudflare's Puppeteer implementation, which was almost a one-to-one move from my existing Puppeteer. Pricing. I was very curious about like how much this would cost. It gets, I don't know, I think I get about 5,000 visitors a day or so, which is not a ton of traffic, but it's enough, and I'm on the Cloudflare like $5 plan. And as part of that, you get a certain number of like milliseconds for CPU time, so that they bill you based on CPU time, right? So my Cloudflare dashboard tells me that I'm averaging about 200 milliseconds per request of CPU time, which seems high because the free plan is 10 milliseconds. So I don't know if that is something I should be worried about or should be looking into. It seems okay to me, but at 200 milliseconds average, I'm doing about 300 or 3 million milliseconds per day. So that means on my $5 plan, I'm going to run out in 10 days on this. And then once you're past the 3 million milliseconds of CPU time, then you have to pay about 6 cents a day. So an extra $1.20 a month to host this website. Yeah. So I'm doing all of the, I think so. So like $6.20 or for the website. And that also includes all of the bandwidth. That also includes all of the caching APIs. That also includes the SQLite database. I looked at it. I have 90, and I only I only put this thing live about 4 days ago, and I don't know, I think I have like 50 million reads or something, and you get like billions. I did the math. I was like, I'm not going to hit that ever within the $5 plan. So I'm never going to go over on that. My image transformations look like they're going to stay within the $5 level as well. So pretty much for $6 a month, I'm able to host this website. And that's not even the only. I probably have 7 or 8 other projects on Cloudflare under that $5 plan as well. So I've been pretty happy about that, because like the alternative is you either run like a VPS yourself, you put Coolify on there. I don't even know that I could do this for less on like a self-hosted Coolify. What do you think?
Oh, I don't think you could. And let me tell you, it probably wouldn't perform nearly as well, because the things that I put on my Coolify are hobby things, or like they're not serious things. Not because Coolify can't handle that, but just because, my server is far away. It is in the Netherlands or something, or Germany, because I host on Hetzner, and they're like, they only offer ARM servers internationally, and I wanted to just experiment with an ARM server. So I don't know. You could probably do it on Coolify and get it to be just as fast, but I don't know if it would be as cheap. Cloudflare, in my mind, is the cheapest best.
No kidding. Yeah, it's like they own the infrastructure, and they're at a very low level. Like, they're a networking company, so I think it's gonna be very hard, especially from like a bandwidth point of view. It's going to be very hard to beat that out. So that feels good, because like I feel like a lot of these hosting companies are getting really expensive.
Yeah.
Like a minimum $20 a month, and then they'll nickel and dime you for a lot of these features. And they kind of need to do that in order to make money, but I don't know, that stuff adds up once you have 3 or 4 different websites.
Some of these places you need a doctorate to understand their pricing table. You just like look at like the 20 different 30 different items they're charging X amount of cents per million requests or whatever on various things. And you're just like, all right, what am I actually paying?
will say Cloudflare is no better.
Sure.
Like I'm counting millisecond CPU time here.
Yeah.
And then like the tools for like visualizing how much you've used are not very clear as well. And then you have to go to the pricing page for every single thing. But I also don't care, because I know that I don't know, you got a bazillion people come to your website. I know that I'm not going to go bankrupt with this type of thing.
Totally.
Which is great. So I'm pretty happy about that. Caching. I use the Cloudflare cache API by setting headers. In Waku, I have middlewares where I can just set the different caching headers that are needed. And that's really nice, because I can do that both on like a request page level, but I can also do it based on like React Server component partials. So if you visit one page to another, you can cache the React Server component payloads. I will say NextJS implementation of caching is much better, because like if you look at the homepage here, in the footer I have Syntax Podcast, where I ping the Syntax API and show the latest Syntax Podcast, right? And then I have my tweets are being put into the footer, and then my latest course are being put in there. So like this content needs to be updated fairly frequently, like at least every couple hours. But if you're caching every page, that's kind of weird, because then you end up in a situation where one page might have old tweets cached because it's still good for 5 minutes, and then the homepage is maybe a little bit different. So with Next.js, you can cache at a component level, which makes so much more sense to me, because I could just cache this entire syntax component, and then my tweets component could be cached as well. And then when you go from page to page, it simply just uses the cached parts to build it. So I ended up actually just caching the data for each of these, and then rendering it out inside the page. And then I have a fairly short caching. I'm still kind of playing with it here and there. There's a delicate balance between trying to get like the fastest perf and having annoying caching issues, which make you want to cry.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
So yeah, that's one thing that I really missed from Next.js, is the really nice cache API from doing that. And as well as like, I don't have any like interactive stuff. Like I don't have stuff where people can type into a box and then it sends it to the server and updates the database. It's mostly just content being pushed out. So I don't have to do any like revalidation of specific pages. Last two things, errors and CSS. So the errors, I integrated Sentry. I'm using the React server component integration and the Cloudflare Hano. So Waku uses Hano as a server, and they expose several hooks where you can get access to the raw Hano API, which I absolutely love. It's like, just give me access to it if I need it. And I can do things at like a Hano server level if I want, or I can just pass it on to the Waku router and it'll pick it up from there. So if I ever need to like step in front of Waku before it does any weird rendering or anything like that, or if I ever want to write a custom middleware, which I wrote several of, then I can do that.
Yeah.
One kind of cool thing is moving over a huge site is you're always worried that you didn't get all the right pages and whatnot. And I actually found a Sentry blog post where when they moved their docs, they had hundreds and hundreds of pages in their docs, and they were just watching they were filtering for not found exceptions in the Sentry dashboard. And then they set a little alert for when a specific page gets above a certain level. And what I did is I just pushed it live for a couple hours, and then I put it back to the old one, and that was enough traffic for me to see any errors that I didn't catch, but also any common pages that people were hitting that were possibly I hadn't linked to. You know, you did the URL a little bit weird because your slug function was a bit weird, so that was a really nice integration.
Yeah.
And then finally, CSS. So my old website was using styled components, and styled components don't play nice on the server. Plus, at the time, styled components were great, but CSS has come so far that I really didn't need any of the styled components features. Like I didn't need JavaScript in my CSS at all. It all needed to be happening at build time. And style components don't work on the server, inside server components. So I took a look at like what are the different options that I can do. I don't want to rewrite any of my CSS.
Mm-hmm.
So my CSS was just written in classes that were essentially just imported and put onto my components. So I don't want to rewrite any of that. And I kind of want to keep the style components API where you just wrap tags around it. So I initially moved it to Panda CSS, and they have an integration that allows you to use like style component like tags. And I forget why I ended up not liking that. I ended up saying, okay, I'm going to scrap this whole wanting to have components as like div wrappers with enclosed styles. And I just moved it all to CSS modules, meaning that I moved all of my style components, and I used cursor and I said, here's a couple that I've done. Move all of these style components into .module.css files. And then I simply imported the module.css files into the components where the CSS was needed. And then you apply the class to the div or to the article or to the layout that you need it. So that worked pretty well. I had to do a little bit of funkiness around getting the autocomplete for TypeScript to work. So I don't know, CSS modules have been around for a long time, but there's not a lot of great tooling around using them with TypeScript. I probably would have chose something else if I was doing this from scratch, but again, I was not interested in having to rewrite any of the CSS. I just wanted it to move over.
Yeah, it's interesting because CSS modules are one of those things that I've kind of avoided, mostly because I don't need them with the way that like Svelte handles scope CSS, right?
Yeah.
But I do think it is probably a great option for most people, and I'm stoked to see that you went with that.
Yeah, it works exactly like Svelte's scope CSS. So it like generates a random-ish class name. You know, if you inspect something on this page, it'll be like content styles 1CIYA, and those are all like unique, but you can also see what they are. That's exactly the same way that Svelte works. The one thing I had trouble with is I sometimes just like to select children inside of a selector, so I might have like this box here for my tweets, and I want to select anything with the class of like red or anything with the class of heart. And that parent-child selectors do not work well in CSS modules. You have to explicitly give everything a class, unless I think there's some rules around like it will select raw elements, or you can use the like :global selector, which we use in the syntax site several times. So I did have to rewrite a couple of those, but I realized as I was refactoring it, I was like, this is kind of better. Even though it's a bit of a pain, this is probably a better way to write some maintainable CSS. That's it. That's the website. It's a pretty fun move over. I've been pretty happy with the perf and how smooth it is to deploy. I think my next steps now are putting more content on it, being able to just write. People ask me all these questions. What 3D printer that you have? I should just have a page on my website that has all of that information. And now that it's so easy to do that, I'm excited to put some more content online.
Nice. I'm happy for you that you were able to make this change, but also like, hey man, that's some real world React server components and getting off Gatsby and all this stuff. It's that's a
rest in peace, Gatsby.
Great thing. Yeah,
I know
rest in peace,
there's
Gatsby.
a lot of people still on Gatsby that are probably trying to make a similar move to see what do I do? Like, where do I go from here? And that's one more thing is people are probably going to be asking why not Astro, and I don't have a good answer to that, other than I just wanted to use React Server components at the time. So Astro probably would have been a good fit for it as well. It's just there's only so many cool things to try, and I've used Astro in the past, so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into React Server components and see how viable that would be.
I've been using Astro Starlight, and it has been a nice experience to work inside of Astro.
What's that?
It's like their docs platform. They have like a bunch of templates. So like Astro now has, it's not like brand new or anything, but like the ability to get started with a template. And one of those templates is like DocuSource style type docs.
Oh yeah.
And it's Starlight. It's very nice looking out of the box. Yeah, it's kind of great.
Oh, that's good. I've certainly been on websites with docs like these. Docs websites are getting so good.
Yeah. Cool.
Well,
all
right.
Thank you so much for giving us this deep dive. And it's actually also nice to know that you said you were not announcing this yet because you were waiting to make sure nothing was trickling in on your Sentry. Do you want to maybe talk about Sentry for 1 second?
Yeah. Well, what I ended up doing is I put it on a subdomain and I tweeted it out. I was like, go nuts, everyone, And then when I was like pretty much ready to deploy it, I just, like I said, I put it live for, I don't know, about 5 hours. And then my Sentry starts to lighten up with all the issues. And I flipped it back. And I just it's almost like I had this like little to-do list with all of the, like I could see where people were clicking on the website. And like there was some like really odd ones where you would get like white, people would be like, it's just a white screen when I was clicking around. And we're like, oh, that's helpful, But then I was able to actually go to the website and see what people were clicking and then maybe hitting the back button or just like basically their path as a video. And then I was able to figure out, oh, that's exactly what was happening. So yeah, pretty valuable in launching a new site. Yeah, I had it on the second screen beside me here pretty much all day long. Trying to figure out what's going on, and it feels so good to like mark as resolved and say a little prayer, hope it doesn't come back.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Set it free.
Cool.
Hope it does not return.
Check it out, sentry.io/syntax, and you will get 2 months of the team plan for free.
Hell yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Wes, for this deep dive. Love to hear this stuff. And maybe someday we'll get to do something on my website if I choose to ever make it worth an episode.
Right on. All right. Peace.
Peace.